All right, there we go. So whatever's in blue for the video's purposes, you write in your notes. So processing the crime scene notes. The first thing we learned here is PPP script is the mnemonic device for figuring out how to process this crime scene. The first P, this means to preserve a life. If there's an actual problem, then we need to preserve life. Here in Kentucky, if you call 911 and have them come to your house, the ambulance, fire truck, and a police officer has to arrive. My brother is a paramedic, firefighter in Lexington, and so he has to go to a lot of crime scenes that he doesn't have anything to do for because either there's no living victims or there's no fire, but he still has to arrive. So they found a young woman. She was 16, I think. It was awful, on the side of New Circle Road in Lexington, deceased. And they knew she was somewhere there, but it was dark. And he was telling me about it, that like, you got to know my brother. He's really goofy. He's like 6'4", and he's only a year older than me. And it's hard for me to remember he's an adult. But he was like, yeah, we were looking for this girl. And everybody's like, I can't find her. And then I was like, she's right there. And I was like, that's a human. What do you mean? But that's how he described it to me. And he goes to all these crime scenes, and he had to help find the victim. But then that exceeded what he did. They found the victim. He left. So the first thing on a crime scene they do, though, is this victim alive? That's why they wanted to find her first, because if she was alive, they were going to preserve her life, provide medical assistance. All right, so you don't necessarily have to write this. This is a different blue. The number one priority is the medical assistance to those injured at the scene, even if that means disturbing the evidence. I asked my brother specifically, okay, if someone's been shot, how do you preserve evidence? Because you have to get their shirt off if they've got a gunshot wound to the chest. He said that they will cut the shirt off, but they will go around bullet holes. That way they can preserve the evidence of that bullet hole. If they have to do anything, obviously they're wearing gloves. And if they have to touch anything, they're wearing gloves already, because you're not going to try to contaminate the person either with your own germs. And masks makes it different now too. So the EMS are trained at crime scene preservation and are aware of possible destruction of evidence. They will send as few people in the house as they can, and they will enter and exit through the same doors if they can. Like, they're going to really try to minimize how many people are there and how many people are touching things. Because even if the victim survives, you still need that evidence to help with their case. So crime scene preservation. This is going to be a scene that is secured by police. EMS should focus on emergency care first and foremost. You don't need to write this all, but they will touch only what they need to, move only which must be moved, observe and document anything unusual. They won't cut, remove, or wash off or cover anything that may be used as evidence later, unless the emergency treatment is going to require it. So like blood spatter or whatever on clothes and whatnot, they're going to try to leave that alone. Don't cut through holes. Keep clothing and personal articles in plastic bags. Keep a log of who the clothing and personal articles and who they belong to and who they are being released to. And then they're going to note the description of personal articles released. So they have a lot to do when they get on a crime scene. They preserve that life, and then they have to deal a lot with all the evidence around. So Locard's principle, this you do need to write. This is a definition we definitely need to know. And what this means is that whenever two objects come into contact with each other, they take a little bit away from that object. There is some sort of exchange that occurs. So what we see in this diagram here is there are three main things. There is the crime scene, the suspect, and then the victim. And in between those three things is the physical evidence. So the victim has to have left physical evidence at the crime scene, big or small, but so does the suspect because they were both there. The suspect is going to leave some sort of physical evidence on the victim, and the victim is going to leave it on the suspect. It's just a triangular effect, unless this person is Dexter and he prepares for his crimes because he's a creepy serial killer, and he would cover the entire room in plastic and then have himself in just like a bodysuit so that he didn't leave stuff behind. Most crimes are not like that. Most crimes, something has been left. And so you're going to have this physical evidence on all three of these things. And that's Locard's principle. Check all these areas. Basically, the rule of thumb is touch as little as possible. If there's something you need to touch a lot, you're going to bag it up and take it back to the lab. All right, the second P, protect the scene. This is going to be a lot of the police and the detectives' jobs, but they might have somebody from a forensics team that is going to be in charge of this as well, just to make sure that it is done completely. So rope off or barricade as necessary. They're going to have guards at these areas to make sure no one's trespassing. They're going to limit exposure and document everything. And they're going to protect the people entering the scene. So this is going to mean, you know, those bodysuits we talked about, or booties. Even the detectives wear those booties on their feet. They're these little paper things, just like you'd see in a hospital. They'll put those on their feet before they go in. I still have this one Crime Junkies in my head from a couple of weeks ago, where the dude was just like killing people and then keeping their dead bodies in his house for 2 years. And it was just weird. But they talk about when they go and finally get in their house and realize this has happened, because they weren't expecting to find these bodies. They were just expected to go in and find a sweater. They were looking for the sweater of a victim. So they go into the house and find all this horrific stuff, and they have to rope off the entire house. They don't know where the dude is that lives there. So they start roping stuff off, bringing out bodies in, you know, the black bags. And they just have all the neighbors chilling out front, like trying to see what's going on. And so that's where you're protecting the people at the scene as well. So we'll talk about it more with photography, but you're going to have a forensic photographer on scene taking pictures of the crowd as well, because there might be evidence within that. And that would be part of the documenting. All right, so why would you want to protect the scene? To keep the evidence uncontaminated until it can be recorded and collected. And every individual on the scene can destroy evidence. Curious people, friends, family, detectives, cops. Those detectives and cops are not forensics. They are not part of the forensics team, so they might have trouble with that. So I want you to write this question down and give yourself an answer in your own words. Why do you think that you would want to protect the scene? 11:10. That's what time we get out, right? Okay. Huh? It's a 10:45. I just wanted to do our notebooks today because we finally got our binders in. All right, third P. Photograph. We have a whole thing on photography tomorrow just because so many people are interested in it. We're going to talk about it in depth. But photographing the crime scene is the third thing you would do. You protect the people, then you protect the scene, and now it's time to photograph everything. You do want to collect evidence, but if you photograph it before it starts to decay or deteriorate, you're going to have a visual of what the scene looked like. All right, so unaltered condition before anything is touched or moved. If evidence moved or removed, it must be noted. Should it be reintroduced or not? We don't want to reintroduce the evidence that was removed because that's going to mess up the crime scene even more. And then the comprehensive, every possible angle, close-ups, anything that may aid in solving the crime. They'll take a bunch of pictures, and they'll take a bunch of pictures at a different angle, and then at a different lighting. That's faster. Okay, so summarize what you think would be the importance of photography. Just summarize it in your notes. All right, so you're not going to move anything in the crime scene before you take pictures, because then you're going to take pictures and get to the jury and they're going to say, and the gun was to the left of the body. And they're like, okay, but in these pictures there's no gun. So what do you mean? And if they have the pictures before they collect the gun, then they will know exactly where it's referring to. All right, overlapping segments in one direction we will talk about. And then they're going to have another set of pictures once the body is removed. Why would they want to do that? Why would they want to remove the body and take more pictures? Adam? Exactly. Is there evidence under the body? Maybe they will notice that there was blood splatter under the body. And that blood spatter then just becomes important evidence because that means maybe the body was moved. Or perhaps there's a whole area around the body that's just spotlessly clean. There's a forensic files where they talk about they clean up this area, they remove the body, and they realize there's a perfectly square, clean spot underneath where the body was. That's because there was somebody had put a mat down to kill the body, or like kill the person and leave the body. And when they did that, they accidentally left a really perfect shoe print in that area. And so by taking pictures after, they went back to look at this perfect shoe print. It was like they had to use weird lighting to find it, though. And then they're going to videotape this crime scene. I do this for my husband, not crime scenes, but he will need to take the kids somewhere, and he gets really nervous because he's never been there. And so he gets to the building and is like, I don't know where to go. So when I go places that our kids need to go to regularly, I'll video us walking that area because then he can look at it and see where to go, and then he's not panicked. So anyways, videoing the crime scene after photography. Okay, these are 4 overlapping photographs into one. So it's kind of like a panorama picture, which they would be able to do way better now because of iPhones and other technology. But in the case that technology is not available, they would then just take pictures in certain areas and line them up like this. And it would give them a very good view of an entire scene in a close-up range. All right, S, search for evidence, systematic and thoroughly. So they're not going to walk into a crime and start randomly picking up evidence, right? That's not going to do them any good. They're going to start in one small section and work their way out. They're going to have a system to it. They're going to be very thorough. They're not going to miss fingerprints because they only fingerprinted this section and then randomly this section and then randomly that section. They're going to have a process. So recovering evidence at a crime scene, especially outdoors, might look like this. They might literally section off areas and pick in the quadrants. That way they can see what they've already taken care of. And that's really important when you're looking at blood spatter in an area, because it can help them figure out the projectile, which direction it came from. Police officers searching a site of a murder in water, you're not just going to start diving in random places. They're going to look in very particular areas of the water to try and work their way towards it. Otherwise, they're not going to know where they've searched. All right, C, collecting of evidence. So what's wrong with this picture? Well, they need to be methodical, collect evidence, prevent contamination. Look at this hand. Ungloved, not helpful. There used to be like a whole thing about this, and now I don't remember what it is. I know they're ungloved. Something about, I think he needed to wear long sleeves. He's got his wristband. Oh, there was something else to do with this bag. But he's put his fingerprints on the inside of the bag, which is quite a problem. So when you're collecting evidence, it needs to be methodical, but it also needs to prevent contamination. So this is important, and you do need to write it all. You can summarize it as you need. But each item must be placed in separate containers, sealed and labeled. Separate containers. The most fragile evidence is collected and packaged first, so anything that can fall to pieces or might decay or deteriorate quickly. And then there are different types of evidence that are going to require very special collection or packaging needs. So you're not going to put a cup of urine that is in the crime scene in a plastic bag. That would be dumb. That would be disgusting. You're not going to get biological evidence and put it in paper where it can break down. Yes. Huh? Yeah, go ahead. All right, so the body is property of the coroner or medical examiner, and the collection of evidence on the body is done by that department. So when they take the body for examination to figure out how long it's been dead and all of that, and they do an autopsy, they will take all of that. They will take fingerprints in that area. They will take DNA, any DNA samples that might have been left on the body. That's going to all be done by the person doing the autopsy. So collecting enough evidence of each piece is important because they need to do tests in the crime labs, analysis for defense, and future review or retrial. So when the plaintiff side of it, of the victim, is going to be tested for something like DNA evidence, like in a rape case, well, if they destroy all the evidence during the trial or during the, what's the word I'm looking for? During the testing of it, if they destroy it all, then the defense team can't use it to do their own testing. And so then it becomes inadmissible in court. So you need to make sure you have enough evidence to retest it if necessary. They're going to collect control samples, substances that might have been in a contamination environment. And then they're going to swab any areas nearby. So they're going to collect evidence around the evidence as well. All right, R, record. There are lots of things they must record about the evidence. The date the evidence was collected. The case number, which is unique to that case. It is usually assigned by the lead investigator, and it's got to be unique so that it doesn't get confused with others. Sometimes consent is required. So whether the investigation required consent of the owner, like in a robbery or what have you. And then the signature of the consent person. So if the consent was required, you're going to need signature as proof. So something interesting that happens in court sometimes, I notice, like with our son's case, he has a case number associated to his case of being in foster care and moving to adoption. And a relative came forward and they had filed a motion for him. It wasn't even a relative, it was a relative of a relative, to file a motion for this child to be moved into their home. But when they did that, they went through the court system and opened a different case, so that hoping that it wouldn't be connected to the current case. A roundabout way of trying to get custody of the child. But because his name is on it, it connected those two cases together, and the judge realized it and said that was sneaky and they didn't appreciate it, and they rejected their case. Because they had already tried to do that through his original case number. So case numbers can be linked together depending on what they're about and who they're about. And it's the court's way of trying to make sure that nothing sneaky is happening. All right, there needs to be a tag number, which is a unique number within the case number assigned to the evidence. These numbers are sequential for each piece of evidence. So a tag number refers to that specific, is this, please refer to evidence A or whatever. A description of the item. This will help to further make sure that it has been properly recorded. The person who receives the evidence, so the name or agency that is collecting it. And that is useful because what if they have contaminated it somehow? And then they need their signature. You don't want to have your signature on it if you haven't touched it, because then if something happened to it, it could be your problem, your fault. Get our phones put up, please. That is our 10-minute warning. We are on R. Okay, we're going to finish IPT tomorrow because I want to get us our notebook.